Today we'll be reviewing the GSI Audera Pro ABR module. The evoked potential module includes a variety of evoked potential test types, including ECochG, ABR, MLR, P300, etc. There are multiple protocols for each test type that are included with the software. The parameters used with these protocols are those most commonly used. We also include normative data for infants and adults and a variety of test stimuli that include CE-chirp octave bands, clicks and tone bursts, and speech stimuli. To set up the Audera Pro hardware, you simply need a USB cable that connects to the computer. Air conduction transducers, the inserts are pictured here, but we also provide the headphones, bone oscillator, and you would have to decide which patient cable you were going to use for the test you were going to complete. To set everything up, you want to plug the device into power, and you want to make sure that you plug directly into a wall unit, not a power strip. Make sure that wall unit is earth grounded. The USB cable will plug in here. If you have an OAE module as well as the EP module, the probe would plug into the HDMI connector. One set of air conduction transducers can be connected at a time. So in this case, we would be using the insert earphones pictured here. If you're going to perform bone conduction ABR, the oscillator, B81 oscillator, would plug into the bone conduction port, and then the patient cable would be plugged in here. There are two patient cables that are provided. The snap electrode lead cable is electrode leads and patient cable all in one. It would be used with the disposable snap electrodes. These are the AMBU electrodes pictured here that we provide in the starter kit. And this cable can be used for ABR, MLR, P300, ASSR. We also provide a 5-lead patient cable that would have to be used if you were using the TM electrode for ECochG or using Tiptrodes or any reusable disc electrode. So if you prefer to use the reusable electrodes, this would be the patient cable that you would use for all your tests. Any electrode that ends in a DIN connector, you would have to use the 5-lead patient cable. Every test type included with the Audera Pro can be completed with this cable. The snap lead cable is all-in-one, and the white snap electrode is the non-inverting electrode positive and is a joint electrode for the right and the left ear non-inverting. So think of it as the jumper cable that's hardwired into this cable. So if you use this electrode, white is positive, high forehead, black is ground, red is right, blue is left. So the benefit of this cable is you don't have to know where to plug the other end of the electrode lead in to the patient cable because it's all in one and combined. If you want to use the 5-lead cable, you would need 4 electrode leads and a jumper cable. So the jumper cable would connect the positive of each channel, right and left channel, and you would plug that electrode lead to the top of the head or the white, just like the 4-lead cable, except you'd be using a jumper cable as well. This cable can be used for all test types, so it really would depend on your preference, except remember that with the snap lead cable, you cannot use any specialty electrode, only the disposable snaps. Okay, a few things before we get into live collection. Every time you open the Audera Pro software, the opening screen will launch. It's here that you can see that your software is connected to the Audera Pro device. You can see a little check mark in the lower right, so that tells you it's connected. If you see an X, that means either your device is turned off or maybe the USB cable became disconnected. In the lower left of the window, you can see I already entered a patient name. And you can do that from this screen. I recommend that you enter the patient information from the opening window for a couple of reasons. One is it makes it easier if you are going to perform more than just one test type. So if you're going to do OAE and an ABR, you can enter the patient information from this window, and then it'll carry through as you open other modules. The other reason is, so you want to make sure the data that you collect is saved. You have to have a patient name in order to save any test data. So you can get into the modules and you'll be prompted to put a patient name in if you haven't. But once you start collecting, it may be difficult to save those test results. So to make sure that that never happens, that you always save your data, enter your patient information here. All you need is first name and last name to get started. For all the other test modules, that's really all you need to enter. But for ABR, if you're going to use the normative data provided, then you will have to go to the age tab and enter a birth date. So the infant norms will not appear if you're testing an adult or vice versa. If you leave this blank and you launch the latency intensity function, it will also be blank. So if that happens during collection, you just have to remember to enter the patient name. Once you've entered the patient name, you're ready to select the test type and get started. So I'm going to select the evoked potential module, and I'm always going to enter and be pulled into this screen. For all 4 modules, it always opens up to the acquisition screen, so you're ready to test. The white area is where your waveforms are going to appear, and in evoked potential, you know you're in the acquisition screen because you can see the EEG on the upper right side. The EEG is going to be live. It's not going to be collecting, but you'll be able to see activity in the EEG when you launch. There is a top toolbar that includes a variety of icons that you can use, that you will use during collecting, such as selecting a waveform marker, maybe adding some cursors, sorting your data, etc. Then you have the collection toolbar, which is at the bottom of the screen. And this toolbar has common test settings that you are most likely going to change during a test. So intensity, the test ear, the stimulus, phase, rare, con, both, the rate, sweeps, etc. So those are common settings that you'll change. You also have the side toolbar, and that includes icons for measuring impedance and checking your amplifier settings. The numbers here reflect pages. There is the acquisition screen plus 9 report pages of data. And I like to think of it as report pages because when you print a report, each one of these pages will be a page in your report. So you can easily organize your test data to include maybe click ABR on page 1, tone burst ABR page 2, bone conduction page 3, etc. And then last, there is a scroll bar to the right of the numbers, the page numbers. And if you scroll down, what you'll see at the bottom of the page is the details of your waveform information for each waveform collected. So ear, filter settings, polarity, intensity, etc. And that's at the bottom of the acquisition screen. When you mark a waveform, you're going to highlight that waveform. So any waveform in green is the active waveform. And right above 80 dB there on the left of the waveform, you can see a black circle. That's what we call like the waveform handle, if you will. You can click in that handle and move the waveform up and down or around or activate that waveform. So if it's green, what you would do to mark a waveform is select the marker that you want. In this case, if you look at my waveform markers, wave 5 is selected in red, and then you hover just above or just below the peak and left click and the marker will appear. You'll see a top mark, which is an upside down triangle, which is your latency marker. You have a bottom marker that is your amplitude marker. So those automatically appear on the peak together. You won't see any amplitude information unless you grab that bottom triangle and drag it down to the trough of your wave. When you do that, then you'll see the amplitude measure. And I'll show you that in the software. Okay, now we're going to move from the PowerPoint to the software. Now I've launched into the ABR test module, and I want to point out a couple things. If you look in the upper right corner, you can see a live EEG. I actually have myself connected here in my home office. It's quite noisy because I'm talking. I'm going to load an existing protocol by selecting Load Settings, Adult Click. And I'm going to select Open. And when I do that, a set of parameters will launch. So if I look at the bottom collection toolbar, here you can see the intensity by default in this protocol is 80 dB, test ear is right ear, stimulus is click. If I select the stimulus icon, here's where I would set the transducer. So in this case, it's the insert earphone. And this is also where I would apply masking should I want to add that to the opposite ear. If I wanted to select a different stimulus, I would select it from either tone burst or a file. The phase is set to rarefaction. I can left click to change it to alternating or condensation, and I think I'm going to set it to alternating because I do have some noise in my home office from testing myself previously. I'm also going to change my rate. I double clicked on it to 19.7, again to possibly avoid some electrical artifact that's present. My number of sweeps is 1024, I'm good with that, and the window or epoch, because I'm collecting an ABR, it's set to 0 to 12 milliseconds. I'm also going to review my amplifier settings. So I'm going to launch the amplifier and icon or settings, and for channel A, I have the gain set to 100,000, which is good. High pass filter 100 Hertz, which is typical for an adult, and my low pass filter is set to 3000 Hertz. And again, because I have some interference in my home office, I'm going to change that to 1500 Hertz. And then I'm going to do the same thing for channel B. In this case, channel A is right ear, channel B is left ear, and I'm going to select OK. Before I get started, I want to see what my impedance readings are. I'm using the 4-lead snap cable. And once those appear, those look pretty good. They're under 5 kilo ohms, so I'm good to go. To start the collection, I'm going to click on the Acquire icon. My right ear test is beginning. If you look in the upper left corner of the acquisition screen, you'll be able to see the number of sweeps as well as the number of artifacts with the percentage of artifacts appearing. If I talk less, which is hard, the number of artifacts will drop. I can mark a waveform as I'm collecting by selecting the waveform marker, making sure I have this waveform selected. It needs to be green. I can increase and decrease the size. If I hover over that, I'm going to hover over, left click, and the mark will appear. Now, if I wanted to see the details of that waveform as far as what the latency was, I would select the icon on the bottom of the side toolbar, which shows you details of the markings. Here I have wave 5 marked at 5.93. If I wanted to mark wave 3, which is probably right here, I would have mark 3 at 4.15 milliseconds with the interpeak latency of 1.77. Now I can start another acquisition for repeatability. and repeat the same thing. Again, the sweeps in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, as well as number of artifacts. Increase and decrease the waveform size during collection. Recording information for each waveform, and that's for the waveform that is the active one, which would be in green. So the second waveform is still collecting. I haven't marked anything, so that's going to be blank. If I select the other waveform, I have 3 and 5 marked, so I'm able to see my latencies. I'm going to go ahead and select that second waveform, mark wave 5. It's a little bit different than the other waveform, etc. Now, one of the things that you can do is add cursors to the screen. So I'm going to select the cursors, and then I'm going to drag them over. There's 2 of them. One is in hot pink, and then the other one is in blue. So it'll vary depending on which one that you're moving. And to quickly get a correlation coefficient, which is a comparison of the 2 waveforms as far as how close they are or how alike they are, I'm going to press the Control key and the handle to the right above the intensity. So here you can see I have 2 waveforms selected. I'm going to go to Process, Cross Correlate my 2 waveforms, and then here you can see my correlation, which is between these 2 cursors, is 0.463. Closer to 1, the better. So that's close to perfect. If you get a 1.0, that means your waveforms are exactly the same. So because I'm talking during the test and there's a lot of artifact, I wouldn't expect them to be exactly perfect. You may want to display the baseline. So if I select that, you can see the baseline, which is 0, appear for both waveforms. If you want the latency to show right next to the waveform marker, you're going to go to Display, Peak Label, and I selected all data, and here you can see now my latencies are appearing there. The other thing I wanted to show you is, so you have a latency column for each marker and an amplitude column. I have to drag the bottom marker down, down to the trough of wave 5 in order to see an amplitude. So if you don't want to see amplitude, you don't have to do that. So the marker will simply stay up there and you'll only see the latency measure. Now, if I were to complete a full evaluation, say test both ears, maybe at multiple levels, I would recommend then, when you're writing your report, to send all that data to a particular page for your report purposes. So to send them all at once, you would go to the icon right under the number 9, send all data to this page, and just select the page of data that you want to send. This is also where you would go to simply clear the data off the page. So you're not deleting data permanently. There's only one way to do that, but if you're clearing it, that just simply means you're erasing it, but it's still there and you can always load it at a later date. Okay, so what I'd like to show you is, one more thing is latency intensity function. That's the icon up there in the top toolbar. Here you can see a couple of marks there for my latency intensity function. And I can actually copy this image of the graph to my page where it'll appear there. It also has that little dot or handle. I can move it wherever I want. But more importantly, I can send it also to a page for reporting. And I'm going to show you a report that I've already done on test results that I've done on myself. So I'm going to go ahead and send all this data to a different page just to clear it. And I want to show you test data that I've sent to page 2 I'm going to sort it by intensity level, change the display a little bit. And so here you can see data that I collected previously at 80, 60, 40, and 30. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the page and see all the waveform information for each wave. So intensity, ear, transducer, the stimulus, number of sweeps, etc. I've already created a latency intensity function and I moved it to page 1. So page 1 actually has my, I'm going to turn those cursors off, the latency intensity function for the data I just showed you, as well as reporting. To add text to the report, you're going to go to the report drop-down, add text, and you'll get this blank window. And that's what I use to add the information that you see here, history, summary, recommendations. The other thing that you can do with reporting is create a set of pre-created results. So I have some results for normal ABR, bilaterally, moderate hearing loss in both ears, etc. So you can pre-create or predefined comments is what we call it for GSI Suite, and then load those as appropriate. Here you can also change the font, bold, italics, etc. for your report. And then also you can move that information wherever you want. So to preview the report, we're going to go to Print All PDF Pages Preview. And here you'll be able to see the report with the history, the latency intensity function. On page 2 are all my waveforms that look really nice, and the waveform information. I can save that to a PDF file, save as, for that patient, and save it somewhere on my PC. Or what I would definitely recommend is up to the left of your waveform markers is a save icon. If you select that, this is saving a copy of the report. And what that does is it will save the data that I have exactly as I have it laid out, including the text, the latency intensity function, and my waveforms. So I'd recommend saving that for your patient because you always can then load it at a later date, and you'll see the exact waveforms as you had them in your report. Okay, now we're going to move back to the PowerPoint. I'm just going to review a few things. So let's review a few of the things that we saw in the data collection. To display the latency to the right of your peak, you want to go to the Display drop-down, display text next to peak label, and select Apply to All Data or Apply to Acquired Data at the start of the test. To view the recording information or the specific peak information, you want to select the recording information icon. You'll see a pop-out there to the right of your acquisition screen. Select the Peaks tab, and there you'll see the latency appear for each marked point on your waveform, as well as the inter-peak latencies. To make sure that your waveforms are all scaled the same, you want to make sure it's set to normalized page. So you want to select that page settings icon, which is right below the number 9 page, and make sure your scale is selected to normalized page. This is also the where you'll go, page settings, to move all your test results from one page to a different page, or where you could clear all the data in your acquisition screen should you want to. You're not deleting data, you're just clearing it from view. You can always load data at a later date. To add text to the report, go to the Report drop-down, Add, select Text, and the text editor window will pop up where you can type in your report findings. You can also type report findings and then save them as a predefined comment, if you will, is what we call it in GSI Suite. So you can save normal, right and left, abnormal, hearing loss, etc. So you can have a variety of text that you can save and access when you're writing the report. This is also where you could change the font style, bold, italics, etc. I didn't show you this, but I want to mention the filtering. So when you select the icon in the top toolbar, that actually performs the filtering action. By default, smoothing is the filter that's selected. So if I go to the process drop-down filter type, you can see that smoothing is selected and it's set to 15 points. So when you want to filter a waveform, you want to make sure it's set to the filter type that you want to use before you click the icon. So if I wanted, for example, to filter a waveform using bandpass filtering, I'm going to go to Process Filter, Filter Type, and then I'm going to select bandpass from my menu and type in my high pass and low pass settings. And once I do that, then I'm going to click on the icon and it will perform the bandpass filtering. Here's an example of bandpass filtering that I did on test data that I collected in my office. The top waveform, I collected data using filter settings of 100 to 3000 hertz, and I have some high frequency noise superimposed on my ABR. So to apply a digital filter after I was done collecting, I went and launched the filter window, selected band pass, and entered 1500 hertz as my low pass filter. And this is what the result looks like. So you can see that I clearly have some electrical artifact in my waveform between 1500 and 3000 hertz, so in that frequency range. And then finally, cross correlation. In order to obtain a cross correlation, you need to turn on the cursors and drag them and to a range. So it's going to cross correlate between a range, usually between maybe somewhere between wave 3, before wave 3 and after wave 5. And then I'm going to go to Process, Cross Correlation to Selected Recordings, as you see here. And in this case, if I look at these two waveforms, my cross correlation was 0.80 multiplied by 180%. So that's actually pretty good. And that's it for now. Thank you for tuning in, and look to other trainings on the GSI Audera Pro.